Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's version of the OSINTCurious Webcast podcast. I'm one of your hosts here. I'm Micah Hoffman. I go by Web Breacher. And this week we have several of our other normal cast members. Nico, say hi to the folks.
Hi, everybody.
And we've got Kirby.
Hey, I'm here too.
And we have a special guest this week, Steve, who goes by the Twitter handle of nixintel. Say hi to everybody.
Hey everyone, nice to see you, and thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. I also want to take advantage of, I want to take some time and say hi to our live attendees. We've got 856, Eric, Ginger T, MW OSINT, and OSINT. Nice. Welcome and thanks for joining us here live. You are welcome to help us make this show great by sending in your questions. We have Steve here, and we're going to interview him in just a second. But if you have questions or comments, or you want to chime in during some of the show, as always, please send us your information. If you are somebody that's not able to attend the show, I get it. It's Father's Day here in the United States, and around the world, it's later on a Sunday. Please go ahead and feel free to use the hashtag OSINTCurious and say, hey, in your next webcast, talk about this, and we'll go ahead and cash that up and go forward. Anything before we get to the wonderful guests that we have here, Nico, Kirby, or shall we just get right into the interview?
Let's talk with Steve. I'm excited to hear about.
I hope I can live up to your expectation.
Yeah. Bars all the way.
This last blog post that we're going to talk about eventually here. I know you can.
So Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into OSINT, that kind of thing?
How did I get into OSINT? Kind of by accident, really. I mean, OSINT is really varied, and everyone seems to have different sort of routes into OSINT, how they're doing it. My background is in criminal investigation, so I've been doing that for a long time. That's been my career, and I kind of wandered into OSINT by accident because I had no IT background. But in my work as an investigator, as time went on and the internet became more and more prominent, more and more prominent feature of how crimes were committed, there was always like a need for an internet guide to find things out. And I was always maybe a little bit of a geek. Well, I was a bit of a geek, let's not lie. So I was always the guy who could get things from the internet. And it kind of went from there, really. Like, I haven't had any sort of training or anything like that. It's just, and you guys would probably agree with this, like, there's something about finding stuff out on the internet that is really satisfying. You've got to have that like real curiosity, that nosiness, and that drive to find stuff out, to find things that are hidden, that people want to stay hidden and you want to find them. So yeah, that's kind of how I've done it. And over, I guess, quite a number of years, I've sort of now found myself, I still work in law enforcement, but as kind of the computer guy, the OSINT guy, more or less full time now. So yeah, I do all sorts of stuff, but predominantly supporting criminal investigations, finding people, finding criminals, finding missing people, that sort of thing.
Cool. So within OSINT, within the field, what are some of the things that you like gravitate towards? I love usernames and that kind of stuff. What do you like doing?
Really, it's really broad, actually. Usernames are a big one. And depends on the sort of stuff, but usernames, social media presence, and then at the other end of the scale, that's when you sort of maybe perhaps looking at individuals or small groups, things like that. And then at the other end of the scale, you perhaps, I like to dig into sort of domains, how they're structured when you have criminal enterprises who are run multiple domains as part of a fraud, for example, and then you're digging into their infrastructure to see how they're structured and where they're structured and where they keep hopping to one thing to another. So yeah, everything really, like, but most of it, it's about finding ways to find people who don't want to be found, really.
Cool.
Are there things you don't like to do when it comes to conducting OSINT research or something? Like specific things?
Some things I don't like to do. I don't like, it's kind of a sports analogy, but in sport, there's such a thing as like home advantage, right? So, and it's the same in OSINT. Obviously, I'm in the UK, and if I'm researching people in the UK, like, it's a home fixture. I know where to look, I know where to find them. What I really dislike is when you get they're sort of over the horizon somewhere in like Eastern Europe or Russia or China, and they're beyond that reach, or there's a language barrier. That gets really frustrating, and it becomes very time consuming. And that's the real big challenge. Yeah. So when you follow the trail somewhere and find someone who's like in China, and suddenly your web searches stop being in English or even European languages, and the characters check, you're just like, I'm going to lose this one. I don't like that.
I think that's a really great point that you have there, is that, for me, everybody knows that English is just a hard language for me, much less another language. And so when you have an investigation that takes you and you're following the trail, and you know that there's more stuff out there on that website or in those areas or that social media platform, having to go through the hurdles of constant translations and using tools to go there, it feels like I'm like OSINTing through quicksand or something. It's like, okay, I can get through this. I know the steps, but that language just hurts.
Yep.
Now, Nico, you know several languages, right?
I know German. I know French a little bit. Well, English, of course. Maybe a little bit of Spanish.
Okay. And Kirby, you've got some languages under your belt as well, right?
Right, as an Arabic linguist, and some Farsi, and did some crash courses in Russian and Greek.
Wow.
I could not read anything of those right now, but the idea is, again, the other every single language, or every, I guess, family of language would be a different case. So the tools you could use against Spanish, you can use some of those translation tools, but you have to just the understanding of the Romance languages, the Germanic languages, etc. They all have a little bit of a different nuance to them, and it can be difficult.
Yeah. For me, for instance, when I was doing like a lot of research in Arabic field, even where the buttons are placed, because everything is from right to left, you were just disorientated while clicking on stuff.
Yep. Yeah. That throws a lot. I mean, that throws a lot of people off, because I can understand what's happening on a page based upon my understanding of the English and where the English buttons or what those icons might look like. But in other cultures, those icons don't mean what you think they mean.
Also, even just when you're just translating, you're copying and pasting it, you can copy and paste it into a search query until you through the whole formatting of your search query off. Right, so you have to take that into consideration. Even if you're not going to try and translate, maybe you just know this Arabic word's important. You copy and paste it into Google. All of a sudden, now you're typing right to left.
Yeah. And
just to use quotes first and then paste it inside. It's just some kind of little tips that you can take.
And Kirby, you have a whole YouTube video talk that you gave on international OSINT and all the different tips and tricks that can be used for not decrypting, but for translating and just getting those nuances. Maybe I'll throw that in there.
I could do a 10-minute tip on that.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yep. Now let's get back to our guest here, Steve. You mentioned earlier that you're a little bit of a geek and you have some hands-on skills, which for a lot of people that do OSINT, they don't have those hands-on skills. They are browser focused, which is cool. They get the job done, but you seem to have some skills, not only because your handle is nixintel, which I'm guessing is like Linux Unix Intel. Is that right?
Yeah, really original.
All right, good guess there. But also, you just posted a series of blogs, which I'll show when we get to sharing of the screen stuff. You posted a series of at least 5 different blogs on how to set up your own OSINT VM. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So, long story short, I mean, like most people, I'd always use the Windows environment for doing stuff. And again, like a lot of people, probably 2-3 years ago when Windows 10 took off, I found it really frustrating experience. And the more I dug into OSINT tools and more I dug into the issue of privacy, I started experimenting with Linux. And probably about 2-3 years ago now, I put Linux Mint on an old laptop, and I really, really liked it. I had no previous Linux experience. I have no background in programming, anything like that. But compared to some other distros, Linux Mint was really easy to use. And I sort of started from there. And I guess, I use Linux Mint all the time now. It's my full-time workstation. but because it's so customizable, so the browser set up the way I want it. If there's software on it that I don't want, I can remove it. I can set up the desktop how I like, so I can have a really well customized, fast workflow. And loads of the tools that are emerging for OSINT stuff outside of the browsers, like a lot of the Python scripts that say tools like the Harvester, like Sherlock, all that kind of stuff. It integrates really easily into Linux. And I kind of went from, I had a Windows partition on my work computer, and I had a Linux one. And eventually, like after probably about 6 months or so, I realized I hadn't even booted the Windows 10 partition because I didn't need to use it. And when I did boot it, it updated and it broke itself. So I haven't, I haven't touched it, and I don't need to. So yeah, that's my Linux background. Again, I like encourage anyone who looks at people who use Linux and think there must be some kind of computer genius. Like, it's really, maybe in the past Linux was a very difficult environment to work in, but with like Ubuntu and Mint now, it's really easy to work in. So we had that sort of really black week, I guess, 2 weeks ago, where obviously lost Facebook, and but Mike Bazel's Intel Techniques site had always hosted the Buscador VM, which is like a custom Ubuntu OSINT build, and he got it back after a few days. But I think when his site went down, he lost, like it wasn't possible to get Buscador. I thought, like, I don't use Buscador, but I know a lot of people do. And it's a really useful tool. I thought, well, actually, when you look at what's in there, it's kind of like, it's not too much of an entry, like a difficult entry barrier to get into Linux. So yeah, so the last few weeks, I started from scratch, and I got the latest version of Ubuntu and fired it up in a VM, and I did a series of tutorials looking at how easy it is to get some of the software on there, and then ranging from like some of the tools that are already in the Ubuntu store through to some of the more complex Python stuff. But yeah, and I wanted everyone to sort of who read it to sort of be confident that they could do it, and it becomes your own really powerful custom tool.
Yeah, I think Kirby, you're having a little discussion in the chat about this, right? I mean,
we have Ginger said he's building his own, which is awesome. He's on part 4 already. But I just said that, if you can do this, yes, do it. But keep in mind that we do need, GUIs. And for people who are considering building this, yes, you're going to do it. You should. But for me, for teaching a whole bunch of my investigators, there's a lot of people who, you say Linux, they're like, forget it. I'm not even going to open it. Right? Yeah. So we do still need GUIs.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of, probably an awful lot of OSINT work you can do with the GUI, and most of it is browser based. Because when you look at those Python tools, and I think, Mike, you'll probably know better than me, but you probably can make most of those run in Windows environment. But they're not easy. They're not that intuitive, and they're not that easy to use compared to GUI stuff. But when you look at what most of those Python tools are doing, they're just doing the stuff you would do in a browser, just really quickly. So for me to make inquiries about a domain might take an hour of clicking through various websites, but I fire up the Harvester and it'll do it in maybe 2 minutes for me. All they're bringing is speed and automation, really.
Well, but
and I love automation, so don't get me wrong.
Well, there's a trade-off there too. I mean, you essentially have to learn the language of the command line. Once you're familiar with the language of the command line, like how do you install, pip install things? How do you git clone stuff? Or how do you even just do like change directories and once you get that basic fundamental stuff down, and I love your blog post because you do the screenshots and you're like, this is what it's going to look like. Here's what you do. And your method of writing and documenting is excellent, Steve. Thank you so much for those. But I agree with what Kirby's saying too, that you can do OSINT in the browser, and there's a lot of automation tools out there, like Microsoft Flow and if this and that, or even scrapers that can do it. And when you get into the command line stuff, you can do so many things really, really quickly.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah, and thank you for making it so Buscador. If you don't know, it's still out there on inteltechniques.com's website. It's a self-contained, all-in-one, not kitchen sink, but it's got a lot of the tools that we as OSINTers use already pre-installed. You download the VM, and if you don't know how to do anything, you just boot it up. You log in as OSINT, and you're going. I mean, it's all point and click.
And don't forget that that system is already hardened by Dave Westcott.
Yeah.
And those Python scripts have GUIs. So it's, well, they put a lot of work in it to make it as foolproof as possible, I guess. And I think that's something really valuable also. Yes, you must learn how to do it yourself, just because then you know how the technique works behind it. But in my opinion, you also need to look into hardening that VM. And that's a whole other thing to think of. And I don't think everybody wants to have time for it. So I think it's really convenient when people like you, for instance, nixintel, or like Basel provide us with trusted VMs that we can just confidently download by getting it on a hash based and download it. And then I'm confident that, well, I don't download a compromised system.
Yeah, absolutely. And you want to keep the barrier to entry like really, really low, because OSINT's great, and you don't want people to get caught up in how difficult it is to get started. So, and building, I'm realistic. I know like building your own VM isn't for everybody, but it's fun to do anyway. Because at the end of the day, I mean, like it's a VM, so you can't break it, right? So yeah, and if you mess it up, then you just delete it and start again. It's no problem.
I love that.
It's fun, yeah.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And there's a lot of benefits to using a virtual machine for some of your OSINT, because you can take a snapshot of it, revert it back. You can, it's really easy to clean. And, once you get it set up, like you said, with your tools, with your processes or whatever it is that you're using, you can fire a new one up and get right into the work instead of having to do all the installation or, oh my God, I got to update things. So cool. So you're doing the actual blog posts. What is something that you're looking to learn in OSINT? With a field this wide, there's always things that we don't know that we want to get better at. What about you?
Yeah, it's funny because there's almost different types of OSINT. Like it's such a broad subject, and like one in the scale, you have guys like Bellingcat who do some really, really good, probably the most prominent open source investigations. I think some of the stuff they've done around the Russian intelligence agencies and things like that, and some of their plots. So that was something I wanted to learn more about, particularly around sort of the photo verification, identification stuff, because that's something that started to creep into more of my own work. And for me, they're the go-to guys. At the other end of the scale, there's the guys who do an OSINT for hacking, which is a completely different kind of OSINT, like scanning networks and learning how to exploit them and socially engineer people, things like that. And that, I look at these guys who like some of the stuff they're doing, and you watch these Kali Linux tutorials, and they're like, I'm really envious of those guys, because what they're doing is still open source work, but it's a completely different dimension, and I have an awful lot to learn from those guys. Yeah, so I mean, it's a massive community, and there's all different sorts of things. But yeah, I'm kind of really interested in the Bellingcat kind of stuff, and the photo verification, geolocation, because that has started to impinge more on the work I do. But yeah, I'm also really envious of these guys who can code like absolute machines. I'm very envious.
So you mentioned a couple of things there, and I'd like to just shift the conversation in a second to my colleague from the Netherlands. You mentioned Bellingcat and really good at coding. That makes me think of you, Nico. Do you want to share why the Bellingcat thing is now something that reminds me of you? Did you just change jobs?
Yeah, I just changed jobs. Yeah, I shifted from LE to Bellingcat. And
congratulations.
Well, thank you. Just because that was the next logical step for me in my career. I was running into the boundaries of, let's say, what law enforcement allows you to do. More, it doesn't have to do with abilities, but more with time, I think. And now you have the time to dig into something like for weeks or months or even longer with an international group with various backgrounds. So that makes it, for me, a little bit more interesting. But still, I have so much to learn. Like you said, the photo verification or video verification, that's something else. And when you look at how Bellingcat does that as a team, that's, well, it's a big learning curve for me also. So yeah, it's really interesting to shift from every now and then to, well, step out of your comfort zone, I guess. I think that's summarizes it best.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you got to keep learning and growing, right? You got to keep, because the OSINT keeps learning and growing. So back to you, Steve. Thanks. Nico. I didn't want to put you on the spot there, but I kind of did. So
no, you're right. Like, yeah, I mean, I'll mention Bellingcat again because I mean, he's either last year or about 2 years ago. I was at a law enforcement conference where Elliot Higgins from Bellingcat came. He came just to do a little overview of one of his presentations, how they sort of exposed various human rights abuses in the Middle East and that kind of stuff. And he's like, Elliot's an awesome guy, and he's really, really skilled. And you're looking at what he's doing, and then there's a sort of Q&A session afterwards, and you're like, oh, what tools do you use? What tools do you use? It's not about tools, it's about how you use them. Everyone's, you know, if I just get the same tools as Bellingcat, I'll be able to do this. Well, of course, like, it's not so easy. But Elliot, for all this amazing work Elliot had done, he said, well, yeah, the tools I use Google Street View, Google Earth, and Google Maps, like for 90% of what was in that presentation. And you're like, okay, yeah, there is no magic toolbox. In fact, I blogged a little bit about this yesterday, but there is no magic toolbox. Like, you don't just copy the Bellingcat tool set and then become a wizard. It's really about method and knowing what your tools can do, but knowing about what you want from an investigation and knowing how you can get it, and only then deciding what sort of tools you want to use. In fact, Nico, I think you wrote about this a while ago when you OSINT is a state of mind. I think you wrote about, and that's one of the things that I've really learned actually from. I mean, I've only been blogging maybe 2-3 months, although I've been on the fringe of the OSINT community for a long time. But I started blogging because you want to start learning and exchanging ideas with other people. But that's one of the things that really comes out is sometimes we have a bit of a fixation with tools. That if we only get the right tools, then we'll be these amazing investigators, when really it's how you think about an investigation and how you plan it out first to find stuff, and then you start applying the tools. And that's, I kind of knew that already, but when you start doing it, it becomes all the more apparent, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that makes it like the shifting, like Facebook the last 2 weeks was the discussion in the OSINT landscape, but it all comes back to the state of mind now. We have to change, we have to adapt, and life goes on.
Yeah, of course. I will, if I can, just before I forget, all I wanted to say about the photo verification Bellingcat stuff is one of the best sort of communities resources I've come across in the last few months is Quiz Time, which I think you guys have probably mentioned. Everyone's probably aware of it. I feel like I was a little bit late to the party, but everyone seems to know about it already. But those guys are a bunch of journalists, mostly from Germany and the Netherlands. They post like daily photo verification challenges, and they're terrible because they always post them just before I'm going to bed. Like, no, I'll do it in the morning. No, I'll just do it a little bit now. And before you know it, like 2 hours have gone by. But yeah, that's been a real steep learning curve. That's a really, really good resource for I've found it brilliant. And for anyone else who wants to like learn about photo verification and geolocation, it's great.
Yeah.
So I come from a background of cybersecurity, and one of the things that we've been talking about for a long time is exactly the nuance that you two have just mentioned. That having Kali Linux or having pen test tools, that's one thing, but having the right mindset, having that determination, that initiative, that curiosity, that drive, that I wonder if, is so very important to exploiting a system or finding out risk or whatever. And in our field too, tools come and go, websites come and go. heck, we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. What doesn't come and go is, well, okay, that's no longer available to me. Let's see all the other places that might have pieces of this, or maybe I can make it myself. You know, if somebody is on, I've seen so many tools in the last couple of weeks or months that where people are taking classic Python tools that have been around for a long time, and they're like, hey, let me see if I can make one that does exactly what I want. And I love that experimentation, that curiosity, and all, because that's what's going to keep you in the game. Is that mindset, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I like to keep things very simple. Like, tools get complicated, and like I say, they keep changing all the time, and you can get bogged down. But really, it's just about being nosy. Like that's that's what it comes down to. Like, I want to know who you are. I want to know where you are, and it's almost like addictive. Sometimes you really want to find out who this person is, or where this person is, or where this web server is really hosted from, or where that email came from. And that's what keeps you going. And until it gets boring, I'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it will.
Yeah, but there's so many other places, like you said. You know, the field of OSINT is like so huge.
It's huge. Yeah.
I mean, there's always going to be fun things. Cool. Kirby, I want to be conscious of you not being on video here. Do you have anything you want to talk to Steve about, or do you want to get into the news of the week?
Let's talk about the news.
Okay.
Yeah, don't worry about me. I will make sure you hear me.
All right. Just want to make sure. All right. Well, so we're going to transition into the news of the last 2 weeks or so. There's a huge amount here, and Steve, please chime in, as well as our regulars. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Before we get to the news of the week, I do want to just show you what Steve's nixintel Twitter account looks like. Let's get him a whole bunch of followers here and amplify his messages, because the blog posts that you've been making over here on nixintel are really exceptionally good. And I love that you're writing and just how you put it together. It's well thought out. So props to you, brother. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, totally agree.
English teacher will be proud.
You know, it's always that like primary school teacher that gets the props. Yeah, Mr. Brown, he hated my. All right. Well, let's get into some of the major headlines of the week. The first one is we had a huge rash of tools that we had relied on, public tools, if you can call it that, that were free, go private. And some of those include Intel Techniques tools. Now, tools is part of it's behind the paywall for Intel Techniques. We also had Pipple.com, whose free search has been retired. And we've seen other things go away. Now, Kirby, I think you and I were talking about this, and I think Nico, you and I were talking about this in another Slack, is that, you know, sometimes we see these things which kind of decrease our ability to do our OSINT the way that we've been doing it, but long term, you know, we find ways around that. Do you guys still agree with that?
Absolutely. Happens constantly. I can't remember even how many of these kind of series we've gone through where all of a sudden some tools that we loved is completely gone, and then okay, so what's the next one? We're still getting that information.
Yeah, I remember the same thing. Twitter, Instagram, they both used to have like these awesome APIs, and they are way more limited than they used to be. But I gotta give one big shout out to Intel Techniques, because they have been providing, like, I think 70 or 80%, maybe probably 90% of the OS community with the tools we all used on a daily basis. So I find it really hard to see that it had to come this far for Basel to shut it down.
Yeah.
Basically because just a bunch of people, I don't even know how to say it nicely, but they just made it impossible for us.
You know, the energy to host that kind of a tool set is immense. You have to keep updating it. You have to fight against all these, again, groups that keep trying to shut you down. Every time a tool changes or an API changes, you've got to update. So I absolutely get my hands off. And I'm surprised it lasted this long, because you see that's part of the thing. You see a tool show up and it's awesome for a while, and they get hammered like that. And then they take it in, and it's just a cycle.
Yeah. It's just sad.
Well, I mean, you know, people will say, oh, this is why we can't have nice things. And yeah, I mean, something's going to be on the internet. It's going to get probed. It's going to get attacked. It's going to be abused unless you put things around it. I'm not sure why people went ahead and made their, they just set up that, Michael Bazell had that webcast through them, or a couple of webcasts through them, and then they had, hey, sign up, and now our free tools are behind this free wall, and you can just give us an email. And then they're like, hey, just kidding, you're gonna have to pay for it now. So
they probably found out there were really a lot of people wanted to use their tools. They were like, well, pay for it.
Right.
Which
And
makes
we don't
sense
know
from
the
a
full
business
story
point of view. Yeah.
for that one. You know, Bazell's been open about what's going on with his, but we don't know the full story. Maybe they're still having some similar issues as well.
Yeah, I'm picturing them looking at their lists of all the people that signed up. They're like, hey, John at example.com, Sally at example.com. So all these people at the example.com domain. Interesting. All right, so yep. So 856 is saying that there's a bunch of so we made a conscious decision, Nico, Kirby, myself, and the other OSINTCurious people, that we would not go into depth about all the different sites that are spawning up tools that are available to replace Intel techniques and Pipple and all those. There are a couple out there that are absolutely ahead of where other ones were. And the same thing with the Facebook. You know, Facebook has made some huge changes in the last couple of weeks, right? That have cut a lot of OSINT investigators and journalists off at the knees, their investigations.
Yeah.
And there's some people that have done some work to go ahead and figure out what is the new Facebook graph like and how to do queries. I think since all of that's settling, and Nico and Kirby, you know, feel free to chime in here. Since all of that's still way up in the air and very flexible, we're going to go ahead and hold back and not, you know, talk about all these different sites that are coming out.
Right, they're just people who are jumping in those gaps. Right?
Yeah, but I'm going to highlight that 856 didn't really share a tool. I took a look at it, and it's actually a news article about New York Times teaching data skills. So it's not even a necessarily a tool, but it's a course.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And one thing which I wanted to point out was that actually Facebook replied to, I think it was either Wired or Vice, that with them shutting down Graph, they are actively working on making the searchability better, especially for researchers and for journalists, because they tell that they know how important it is for people like us or other investigators to keep finding stuff on their platform. So I'm hoping that they're just as quick as cutting us off in providing us with new search tools, but I highly doubt it.
Yeah, that sounds like a PR thing to me. I mean, it's like, hey, you know, we understand that you're all upset about this. I also saw a post where people are like, well, you know, Facebook, you've stopped our ability to find things, and that also means that you've stopped, you know, oppressive countries and companies from finding the same stuff about people. So you know, they've decreased everybody's ability to do things across the board. Seeing what comes back and what they allow law enforcement or researchers to do in the future, that's going to be interesting. Steve?
Yeah, I've seen like two different stories. I've seen the official line from Facebook, which was along the lines of, yeah, well, people weren't really using the graph search anyway. Most people search by keywords, so we brought back a really functional keyword search for you. But I think it was Henk van Es from Bellingcat who he'd spoken to some Facebook sources off the record, and the story was all the same, that they don't want another privacy scandal. They don't want another Cambridge Analytica. Which, you know, we decide which is true, but they, like, I don't want to be too much of a hypocrite with this, because Facebook Graph Search, let's say, was an excellent tool. You could do a lot in a very short amount of time with it. But at the same time, Facebook are getting hammered, and rightly so, for their complete disregard for people's privacy. So we're like, well, which, you know, and now we're a little bit upset by it. It's like, we wanted you to, you know, take privacy more seriously. My privacy, not other people's.
Exactly. And that was something that I was like, this is so hypocritical, because like, we're on one hand, professionally, I'm like, hey, we need access to that tools, but personally, I'm like, please don't let anybody do this. You brought up an interesting point though, the privacy feature. I'm not really sure that I know that Facebook's cut off the graph search, but as far as a privacy violation, what Cambridge Analytica didn't they have like a mobile app that did stuff in the back end? And Facebook is still selling advertising and other things. So I don't picture that they've cut off everybody's access to our data.
They've made.
You know what? I'm going to say that they didn't cut off anybody. Yeah, I just want to point in that they didn't cut off anybody. All those searches are still capable, not even through necessarily the, do the base 64, although the base 64 version of doing it might get you to your exact record easier. I feel like I've been playing around with their keyword search and their filters and being able to get the same data, which hopefully I can kind of show how I'm doing it anyway. So I think they just made it a little bit harder. Yeah, I don't think that the privacy thing works at all for this.
So you think that they've taken a language that we knew and were easily embracing and using, and they've scrapped it, and now we're using a different language and different methods, but it's all still there?
It's all still there. It's all still available, in my opinion.
I look forward to your 10-minute tip on that.
Yeah, but it makes sense though, because when someone posts it's like global and they like tap the little global thing, it's still there for the public. The information is still there. The comment is still there. The picture, which is for the public, is still. Only the way to find it is a little bit harder.
Yeah,
it's not like the database on the back end changed.
Yeah. Well, let me go ahead and just go back to what 856 was posting here. This is a New York Times thing where they have they're teaching its reporters data skills. So, I mean, a lot of things that we do is data collection, right? The analysis of this is where a lot of the OSINT comes into play. It's capture the data, pull it in, and then let's see what it means. And here they've open sourced a program. I haven't read this article. Kirby, did you get through it a little bit farther than I?
No, I mean, I just saw the link myself, so I kind of scanned through. And but it's not a tool. It's more like, here's some, educational information.
All right. We covered Facebook. Any more things about Facebook?
There's a question on who, what, which started the Cambridge scandal. So we want a little bit of background on the Cambridge scandal.
Okay. So anybody want to take on that?
Yeah.
Or Steve? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll do my best. It seems an age ago now, but I think someone will correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think the upshot of it was that Cambridge Analytica were or the front for some big data mining organization. They developed an app which they're targeting Facebook users and taking their data to assess their sort of voting intentions and electoral habits, that sort of thing. And the sort of, I think it seemed really obvious to me that Facebook were probably doing this anyway, but then it became public that Facebook were actively selling off people's data to third-party companies so they could profile them. In this case, I think it was to do with an election. I can't remember if it was the US elections or the Brexit election or something else. I've forgotten. But I think that was kind of long and short of it and that was a little bit of a wake-up call to people about this amazing free service who called Facebook and that they were how they make their money.
Yeah, exactly. And they were very big in the 2016 elections and helping to shape and focus what was provided to different populations. And with graph search, they were able to target very, very specific pockets of people with specific messages. And it was very interesting. So, all right. So Facebook, we're gonna keep watching and seeing what people are posting. And this will eventually go ahead and evolve into something. We'll have a lot of places. We mentioned that some places are putting up tools. Intelx.io has some of the tools for that. We're on the Bazell Intel Technique site. There are other ones out there as well. Let's take a look at this. Now, Kirby, this was something that you tweeted out. And I saw it off of your Twitter feed about Mozilla doing a paid subscription service.
Yeah, so when this came out, a few people, and I think even maybe you, Micah, got kind of upset and thought they were going to go locked too, because it was at the moment when everything was shutting down. But what it really is about is instead of, I mean, the normal Firefox will just act as normal, but they're actually adding maybe a VPN so that you could actually protect your IP address while you're there and cloud storage. So I'm really interested to see, what happens with this.
So like there'll be Firefox and Firefox Pro, something like that?
Maybe. I don't know that it would, I think you would be inside your regular Firefox. So you'd be in Firefox, but maybe you'd have an add-on service where you could, click a button, maybe an add-on, and just change your IP address. And then also, as far as the cloud service, I'm not sure. Would it be a Dropbox sort of thing, or?
Yeah.
Well, they kind of have it like the Firefox sent already, and maybe then with some more retention time or something.
Right.
Well, one of the things that they are talking about is that Mozilla, the foundation, is reliant on donations and all for a lot of the work that it does, and
from search engines.
And search engines, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they want to be less reliant on Google and other places and be more independent, which means that they need to sell some kind of product or offer. So this will be interesting. We'll see what happens.
I like that they're using Proton VPN. That's my favorite.
I do like Proton VPN. Yes. Yeah. Which brings up a great point. Our old friend Ludo Block, who's was tweeting out this past week, and he has this great thread, which again we'll put into the show notes, about VPNs, which VPNs he uses and all, and how does he use VPNs. He mentions that one privacysite.net, which has a great spreadsheet type of format for looking at a lot of different factors that go into people's choices for which VPN provider they use. But he also talks about some of the features that you might be interested in, like the mandatory kill switch and shuttling DNS over the VPN and all. So that was a neat article. I think, Nico, maybe you found that or retweeted that, or?
Could be. I retweet a lot.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into some of the other fun stuff that happened these past couple of weeks. The Layer8 OSINT and Social Engineering Conference came and went. Ginsberg and I were there. Ginsberg wasn't able to be at this webcast, but he and I were there. He ran the Trace Labs CTF, which was very successful. We had a lot of people, and for those of you that don't know, tracelabs.org runs an OSINT CTF where they work with local, mostly United States from what I've seen, United States law enforcement to find people that have gone missing the last 30 days or so and have been reported missing. And then they provide information, the law enforcement provides information to Trace Labs. Trace Lab then sets up a CTF at events. And I hear that they might be setting up a worldwide, just, hey, help us find these people type of event, which would be really, really cool. The idea is that if you find things about the people that are missing, and you submit them to Trace Labs. Trace Labs has judges that look it up and go, yep, this was non-public before, you found something new, you get X number of points. And then they take all that information and send it over to law enforcement to actually see if that person wants to get found, and also to help move forward. They've been very successful at other events, and I heard that they were pretty successful at the Layer8 conference as well.
But what if just my devil's advocate mind popped up? What if you are looking with a team at people who actually don't want to be found?
Yep, and that was something that was brought up as well. The idea here is that you, as a person that's a contestant on this, you are bound by certain rules, like don't publish this, don't blog about the specific information, although those are kind of loose rules. But the information that's collected by Trace Labs about the person does not get published to the internet. It goes right to law enforcement. So let's say that, I think in your example, somebody is a victim of domestic violence. Their spouse has beat them up and they've finally left their spouse and they don't want to be found. Well, Trace Labs isn't going to post, hey, we found this person. Look. They're going to send it to law enforcement, who then reach out and say, hey, did you want to be found? And
okay, that's good. Yeah.
It's good thought. And, I always like the way that your brain works, where you're always thinking about, well, the other side of the coin. So, yeah. At Layer8, I went ahead and I gave a presentation, and that yielded some 10-minute tips. So on the OSINTCurious website, we have 6 different new 10-minute tips that are just about how to go beyond looking in your browser. To your point earlier, Steve, You were saying that you know, we can use a browser, but the more we get into these automated tools and all, the more we get, and the faster we get it too. That automation piece. What my talks are about, what was about moving beyond just looking at what's rendered in the browser. So
Yeah.
those are
And they were
times.
really cool. I really liked, especially I liked the TikTok one, because that gave, I think, a lot of people some new insights on how to gather information on TikTok, because it's a really big emerging platform, and I think it's becoming maybe even bigger than Instagram if you see how quickly it rises, especially here in Europe.
It's really addicting. Also, let me point out that, you know, you get sometimes more information, like TikTok, for example. You get the dates, right? And it's also easier to work with information. So if you get it from the browser, sometimes it's hard to get it into something that's manageable to work with. Whereas you create a tool, you can send it straight to spreadsheet or straight to another tool.
Yeah.
So, Mika, correct me if I'm wrong. Is Layer 8 OSINT only?
It's OSINT and social engineering. Those are the two primary tracks, and there were several hundred people there this year. It's up in Rhode Island, and the talks were social engineering, physical penetration testing, and the like, as well as OSINT. So they had two tracks going for most of the day. It's a one-day conference. Next year, I hear that they're possibly expanding, and one of the other people that we're going to be bringing onto the webcast here is Patrick Laverty, who is one of the co-founders, co-runners of that conference.
Yeah.
So we can get more about it from him.
Wish to be there one day.
Yeah, that'd be cool. All right, let's see what else we got here. We have, this was something that happened just today or yesterday. Nico, you want to tell us about what this is?
Well, this popped up in my timeline, and well, the quote-unquote OSINT accounts, they were suspended on Twitter. And I gotta say OSINT accounts with quotes, because they were more like accounts who like tweet breaking news or like news from conflict zones or specific suppressed countries. And they were, so in fact, they were making news public that must be public because it's in some like weird crazy regime state or something. And Twitter all of a sudden started suspending a couple of those accounts. Actually happened to my Dutch OSINT guy account a few years ago too, because I was tweeting about the Turkish coup attempt back then. And well, and in my opinion, it's not Twitter who is actually, well, they are suspending you, but it's people reporting your specific posts which get you suspended. So mostly these are, in my opinion, kind of like troll campaigns from those nation states who don't want you to make things public, or at least give those specific incidents momentum, and they will report you en masse, probably by bots or something, and which gets a lot of these, well, kind of important accounts suspended. So I wanted to point it out. Maybe it's just to keep in mind when you have like a high profile kind of accounts, you might want to consider what you tweet and when you tweet it. Maybe just set up like another sock puppet account for these kind of things. When they get suspended, you can spin up another one.
Well, and also I think somebody mentioned, it might have been you, Nico, that that we don't, we think in the United States, we think we have freedom of speech and stuff, but these are not public platforms. We're not standing on some street corner out in the middle of the county or the state or whatever saying, hey, Twitter doesn't, what we're doing is we're using a private platform owned by private companies, and they're allowing us to have free accounts on there. So at any date and time they want, they can go ahead and suspend people. We've seen some really crazy suspensions recently, just for weird stuff. And there was actually a Facebook challenge with the fake video of Mark Zuckerberg recently, where somebody was testing whether Facebook would actually censor one of those deep fake videos with Zuckerberg in it. We're seeing that, and what people have to realize is that these platforms are not free. They're free for us to use, but they're not they're not free speech platforms.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
TikTok just went and I know that they shut down within the last couple of months, some different users too. I have no idea why, but then there were some TikTok campaigns to let certain people come back on as well. And so you see that it's everywhere.
Yeah, and probably Twitter is like an algorithm. For instance, if 100 people report Mika's account, don't do it, in like an hour, it gets automatically suspended, and then you have to fill all kinds of forms in Twitter to please get back. And I tried it with my previous account, but they don't even respond at all. So. Yeah,
and that's one of the tough parts, because nowadays it's trivial to get somebody to have 1,000 bots or 500 bots or even 100 bots do a thing. So instead of tweeting out, "Hey, Micah said something inflammatory," what they could do is submit a form that says this tweet is inappropriate, and if enough people do it, get us banned.
Yeah,
it's almost like a social media denial of service.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's go back to the news. So that's something to worry about. And then, Nico, you were talking about this other thing, this fake video news debunker.
Yeah, Invid. Well, it's just an add-on or extension which runs in Chrome or Firefox, or basically any browser, which I really like to use. It was initially made by the European Union under some kind of grant, and now it has been updated by another party which they hired, and it has some new updates, and it's been tweaked and fine-tuned, and especially particularly good for verifying video footage or images on, for instance, YouTube or Facebook. It gives you also the ability to magnify within a picture. For instance, if you want to see the tail number on a plane, you can magnify it with that. So it's a really, I really like to use it from time to time. It's a valuable one in my toolbox.
That's Invid, and we will go ahead and post that in the show notes as well.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Any other things from this past week or these past 2 weeks that anybody wants to talk about?
Well, maybe we should point out Twint / Gogue project. I would just like to give a warm applause to Pilco, non-privacy. What's his name? He goes by like 3 handles. Francesco Poldi is his name, which I know him by, and he makes these awesome projects. The Twint Twitter scraper, which I think almost 70% of the OSINT community uses, but he also works, which I was really fond of and played with last week. He's in a final beta on a Telegram scraper and visualization tool, which really works well. So, well, he's just one guy, and he works really hard to provide us with these awesome, stable running tools. So check out, I think its Twitter handle is non-privacy.
Non-privacy, right.
Yeah, NONE privacy. And just type in your search engines Twint or Gogue, and you will find his tools. And we will put links to them in the show notes. It's really awesome, and I just think he deserves a big shout out.
Yeah, definitely. I love it when people post blog posts like this, where it's not only, hey, I made this tool, but here's what the tool does and how it works. Because if you're somebody that's new out there that doesn't Python a lot or doesn't use Go a lot or whatever, understanding how a script works is very important to your comfort level of, yeah, I can actually run this tool. So I really like how he's
yeah, it's similar to nixintel Steve's his type of blogging, just writing up, showing with pictures what actually happens. I really like it. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for bringing that up. Kirby, anything else as far as the news?
No, but I'll keep tagging things on Twitter with OSINTCurious as I see them come across. So
excellent.
Yeah, excellent. And I see someone in the chat pointing out that we 5 or 6 shows ago we talked about the spying challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And the new one is the 2019 edition is coming up at during Le Hack, which is French for the hack. I know my languages, I told you. And it's on the 6th of July. So if you want to check it out, go to spyingchallenge.com and it will point you to 2019.
Nico, there's another question for you there too.
Oh, another one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a really important week for Bellingcat because on Wednesday, the Joint Intervention Team from all like law and government agencies will give an update on MH17 plane crash, and Bellingcat will also on the same day will reveal a 100-page report on new findings about the downing of the MH17. So, well, I can't get into detail. We just have to wait till Wednesday, but be on the lookout. I think it will be all over the news, so be on the lookout for those updates. Really important.
That's the MH17 plane that was shot down or went down. More information coming out.
Yeah.
Later in the week.
Yeah, and well, like someone in chat, like Eric says, it's a win for OSINT. Well, I definitely think it's a win for OSINT. When you look into that specific case, well, it's more OSINT than that. It's all in there. It's image verification. It's finding people. It's finding number. It's finding everything. So, yeah, really important work.
All right. Well, how about this? How about we go ahead and wrap this up? We're just about at an hour here. Want to thank our special guest, Steve, nixintel. Steve, do you have anything that you want to promote? Anything, blog posts coming out or fun things that you're doing that you want to promote?
Yeah, I have a few blog posts in the works that will look at how you can attribute websites to people. Now that Whois is like post GDPR is like it's not as useful as it used to be. I have a few posts on website attribution which will be coming out shortly. Yeah, I have no other services or that to promote really. Just as quiz time, as I mentioned before, has been a great resource and is my new favorite hobby. So yeah, if you don't use quiz time and you want to learn about OSINT stuff, that's a great place to start.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Hey, Kirby, what do you want to talk about here?
Yeah, I would just point out that I do have another class happening in Dallas. So if anybody wants to come, that is law enforcement only, and it's subsidized by the sheriff's departments out there. So really low cost. I think our cost is $4.95 per person. So look at our plessas.net/events.
Nico?
No, nothing for me at this moment.
Cool. Well, before I get to my shameless self-promotion, I want to thank two of our sponsors, the SANS Institute, for helping us get this webcast and podcast going and help keeping us in the stickers and logos and things. Also, our newest sponsor, Hunchly. Thank you to Justin Seitz and his company for helping us to, again, just keep this thing going and get great guests on here and keep putting out good content. So my shameless self-promotion is my class is my OSINT class at SANS Institute is happening all around the world. Lots of time, lots of classes available for the summer. I'll be out in DC this coming week. If you are going to SANS Fire and if you are going to be down there in Washington, DC, please pull me aside. I'll have OSINTCurious stickers. I'll also be out in California in July and August, so I'll bring some stickers out with me. Other than that, thanks very much for coming to the show. Thank you again. Huge thanks to Steve for being with us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And have a great week, everybody. Stay OSINT curious.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for coming and listening.